Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adrianne Robert. Adrianne Robert was born on January 4, 1983, in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew her described Adrianne as a beautiful, kind person, always happy and vibrant. At the time of her disappearance, Adrianne was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and they were planning to start a life together. She was renting a house with her friend Jay. As their relationship progressed, Adrianne and Justin found a new house in July 2012, where they intended to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrianne decided to throw a goodbye party before moving out. Adrianne told Justin that she and Jay would be going out to a movie or a bar. Justin couldn't join them because he was busy with some other things. He didn't object to Adrianne spending the evening with Jay, as they were close friends. Initially, Adrianne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about good times and having a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night out and went to the Diamond Dolls strip club. Jay called 911 at 3:34 a.m. to report that he had found his roommate, Adrianne, unresponsive. He told the operator that they had been at a nightclub earlier, but Adrianne had left before him. When Jay arrived home, he discovered Adrianne on the bathroom floor, her eyes open but not breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, suggesting a crime had taken place. The 911 operator instructed Jay to focus and perform CPR on Adrianne, guiding him through the process. Jay followed the instructions, attempting to revive Adrianne until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, by the time the ambulance arrived, Adrianne was deceased, and the medics were unable to help her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation aimed to answer two key questions: who was responsible for Adrianne's death, and was her roommate involved? The police began by thoroughly searching the house, checking every closet and under every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not hiding inside. Detectives and forensic experts observed that there were no signs of forced entry on the front door when they first arrived at the crime scene. Adrianne's body was found on the bathroom floor, wearing only a bra. A stab wound to the chest was the cause of death. The signs of a struggle in the bathroom suggested that Adrianne had tried to defend herself, leading detectives to suspect that the killer was a man. The detectives had to wait for the autopsy results to get more information. While searching Adrianne's bedroom, they noticed that someone had cut off a piece of her bed sheet. It seemed like the killer was trying to destroy evidence, possibly to eliminate any DNA they may have left behind. However, it was puzzling that the killer didn't take the entire sheet, as the remaining part could still contain DNA. Further investigation revealed a substance similar to seminal fluid on the sheet, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Additionally, Adrianne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that the killer may have stolen it. The police launched an investigation into the crime, searching for potential witnesses and issuing an alert for the victim's car. To piece together the events surrounding Adrianne's death, detectives needed to gather as much information as possible about her final hours. Before proceeding, however, they had to break the devastating news to her family. Adrianne's parents were stunned by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter. Justin discovered the shocking truth the morning after, when he saw police surrounding her house. He immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The detectives then broke the devastating news: Adrianne had been killed the previous night. Given that perpetrators often returned to the crime scene, and Justin's close relationship with Adrianne, the detectives felt compelled to investigate him as a potential suspect. In cases like this, it's standard procedure to investigate the people closest to the victim first. Later that day, police found Adrianne's car abandoned just a few blocks away from her house, with the headlights still on and the keys in the ignition. This discovery further supported the investigators' initial theory that the killer had likely used Adrianne's car to escape the crime scene. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the interior of Adrianne's car for any clues that could help crack the case. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to identify the person who was driving the car. Although there were no cameras at the exact location where the police found the car, neighboring buildings had cameras that captured footage of the area. After examining the recordings, investigators spotted a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair. The man was seen walking away from Adrianne's car around the same time the 911 call was made. He was heading in the opposite direction, which made it essential for investigators to track his next move. Unfortunately, their attempt to follow him was thwarted when they discovered that he turned a corner where there was no surveillance camera. The investigators rewatched the footage multiple times, hoping to pick up on a detail they might have missed initially. The police had difficulty gathering clear information about the man in the recording because it was taken at night. However, interviewing witnesses provided new leads. A neighbor reported seeing Adrianne and a man running past his house on the sidewalk at night. This was unusual for two reasons. It was late, and they didn't appear to be going for a run. Adrianne was wearing a dress and holding her shoes, while the man was not dressed in athletic attire. Although the situation seemed suspicious, Adrianne didn't appear to be in distress, as she wasn't screaming or calling for help. As a result, the neighbor didn't think much of the incident at the time. To reconstruct the events leading up to the 911 call, investigators spoke with Adrianne's roommate, Jay. Jay had gone to the club with Adrianne and claimed to have found her on the bathroom floor. During questioning, Jay told the detective that he and Adrianne had a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, a club they often visited to unwind and escape their daily problems. Jay told investigators that he and Adrianne walked to Diamond Dolls because they had been drinking and didn't want to drive. The police focused on the club because it attracted a questionable crowd. Jay claimed they arrived around 10:30 p.m. and stayed for several hours. While they were sitting at a table, a stranger with a beard and a baseball cap joined them. Later, Adrianne decided to leave, and Jay said he stayed behind. He noticed the stranger had also left. To verify Jay's story, investigators reviewed the club's surveillance footage. They found a camera with a wide angle that recorded everyone entering and leaving the club that evening. The footage showed Jay and Adrianne arriving at the club, appearing calm and normal. Another camera at the entrance provided a clear view of people's faces and clothing. CCTV footage confirmed Jay's account of events. It shows him leaving the club alone at 2:53 a.m. and walking towards his house. The footage also reveals that Adrianne left the club earlier, at 1:38 a.m. Notably, she was seen wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket when she arrived at the club, but only wore the dress when leaving. This discrepancy raises a key point. Shortly after Adrianne departed, a man wearing a baseball cap rushed out of the club, presumably to return the jacket she had left behind. After returning the jacket, the man and Adrianne appeared to be engaged in conversation. The exact topic of their discussion remains unclear. Rather than returning to the club, the man followed Adrianne. After exiting the parking lot, they turned right onto a relatively isolated street with few houses. It is unclear whether Adrianne felt threatened or uneasy at this point, and this may remain uncertain. After reviewing the evidence, investigators determined that the man seen on camera at the club and the man near Adrianne's abandoned car were two different individuals. Based on the circumstances surrounding her death, they believed the man from the club's CCTV footage was the likely culprit. The other man may have been an innocent bystander. The police were exploring all possible scenarios to provide answers to Adrianne's parents as soon as possible. Adrianne's family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings. Investigators met with her parents, Mark and Dolores, and assured them that they would do everything possible to find and bring the perpetrator to justice. According to her parents, Adrianne was a friendly person with no known enemies. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and her roommate, Jay. Investigators suspected that Adrianne did not know her killer. The laboratory report soon arrived, revealing that male DNA was found on the sheet, Adrianne's body, and the walls. Although the killer had attempted to destroy evidence by cutting out part of the sheet, forensic experts were still able to recover the DNA. However, when the investigators compared the DNA to the database, they were disappointed to find no matches. As a result, the police had the DNA of an unknown suspect in CCTV footage from the club where Adrianne spent her last evening. Detectives focused on the footage as the key to solving the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing both daytime and nighttime footage, which led to a breakthrough. Approximately 8 hours before Adrianne's death, investigators spotted the same man who had been talking to Adrianne in the parking lot and had left with her. This time, they got a clearer view of his face. To determine how the unknown man arrived at the club, investigators reviewed the footage and saw that he had taken a taxi. The taxi's phone number was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the taxi company. This new information made it simpler to identify the man. Detectives discovered that the phone number that ordered the taxi was caught on footage near Diamond Dolls, and it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, detectives confirmed that it was the same person. As a result, Thomas Frederick became the primary suspect in the case. The police required concrete evidence to arrest Frederick, but the surveillance footage alone was insufficient. To gather more evidence without alerting him, they began secretly monitoring his activities. Their goal was to obtain his DNA sample discreetly, as they were concerned that approaching him directly might scare him off. For a week and a half, the officers tracked Frederick's movements, following him to work and keeping a watchful eye on his home at night. Their patience eventually paid off when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers collected the butt and sent it to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The purpose of the test was to determine if Frederick's DNA matched the samples found at the residence of Adrianne Robert. While waiting for the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, as they suspected he might attempt to leave the state at any moment. After receiving the laboratory report, everyone's anticipation was met with an unsurprising conclusion. The DNA analysis revealed that the samples found on the sheet, walls, and Adrianne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. As a result, the police arrested and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed to be a frequent visitor to various clubs and bars, where he would often meet new people. When shown a picture of Adrianne, he stated that they had met at Diamond Dolls, where she had bought him a drink and they had danced and talked. However, when the police confronted him with CCTV footage that contradicted his alibi, he changed his story. Frederick then claimed that he and Adrianne had walked together to the end of the street before parting ways. When asked if he had ever visited Adrianne's house, Frederick responded that he couldn't remember due to his intoxication. This inconsistency cast doubt on his entire account, leaving it unclear what he was trying to conceal. The man initially claimed he had no recollection of being at Adrianne's house. However, it was revealed that a witness had seen Adrianne running barefoot while the man chased after her, which suggested that he was lying. When questioned by the investigators, Frederick provided an explanation. He claimed that Adrianne asked him to escort her home and that she began running suddenly after deciding she was in a hurry. She took off her shoes, prompting him to chase after her in order to stay by her side. Despite Frederick's shifting story, detectives uncovered compelling evidence. A DNA test showed that Frederick's DNA was on Adrianne's sheet and numerous items throughout her home. Frederick altered his story after receiving the DNA test results. Now he's claiming self-defense when confronted about his inconsistent explanations. Suddenly remembering past events he couldn't previously recall, Frederick finally shared an apparently factual narrative about how things actually occurred. They spent an intimate time in Adrianne's home where things ultimately became grim and both engaged. A confrontation between Adrianne and Thomas Frederick turned violent and resulted in a physical fight. During the altercation, Adrianne pulled out a knife and threatened Frederick, who then defended himself. Unfortunately, Adrianne was fatally injured in the process. After the incident, Frederick panicked and fled the scene instead of calling for emergency assistance. He feared being blamed for Adrianne's death. As a result, Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life and appeared in court in January 2014. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a different account of the events. According to the prosecution, Adrianne and her friend Jay had been drinking at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, where they met Frederick. The three of them socialized and chatted casually. However, the next day, Adrianne decided to leave the club early to move into her new home with her partner, Justin. Frederick allegedly took advantage of the situation and followed her, despite her attempts to evade him. He chased her to her home, broke in, and attacked her with a knife from the kitchen. The prosecutor stated that the injuries on Adrianne's body suggested that she was forced to have intercourse with Frederick. Fearing she would report him to the police, Frederick decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a portion of the sheet where his semen had stained, but this effort was unsuccessful. The police were still able to find his DNA on multiple surfaces, including Adrianne's body. Frederick then took Adrianne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. During the medical examiner's testimony, Adrianne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, left the courtroom, unable to bear the details of their daughter's final moments. Mark Robert later explained, "I didn't want to hear that. It won't bring Adrianne back, and I didn't want to know what she endured." It was clear that Adrianne had put up a fierce struggle. Her parents have since struggled to cope with life without their daughter. The grieving family member acknowledged that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. "We're still reeling from the loss of our loved one, and it will take time to recover," Dolores said. "However, we will eventually rebuild our lives, as that's what Adrianne would have wanted. It won't be easy, but we will get through this." During the trial, the defense team attempted to tarnish Adrianne's reputation by claiming that she had invited Thomas Frederick to her home for consensual sex. However, this assertion is baseless and may have been a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence at the victim's house. The evidence, however, tells a different story. The presence of DNA points to one person, Thomas Frederick. The defense also claimed that Frederick acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. His claim of self-defense was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Although he was accused of killing Adrianne, there was no evidence to suggest he forced her into a sexual act by threatening her with a knife. Thomas Frederick, 25, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Adrianne's father expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that while it wouldn't bring his daughter back, justice had been served. He found it difficult to remain calm in the presence of the man who murdered his daughter, especially since Frederick showed no remorse or sympathy, even after the verdict was read. Adrianne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, were overcome with emotion in the courtroom, but felt a sense of relief and happiness when the verdict was announced. They remembered their daughter, a always happy and lively person whose smile could light up a room, and expressed sadness that they would never see her again.